I'm Tammy Mulcahy. I'm a co-chair of End Plastic Soup. Carl's with Open Oceans Global. Carl, can you start by telling people about Open Oceans and how and your new tools to identify the worst situations that we have going on around the world?
Yeah, so Open Oceans Global was formed in 2006, and we started with a very grand goal of trying to aggregate and visualize the world's ocean data because we know so much of it is siloed, and that turned out to be too big of a task. So we've focused down to essentially do the same thing, but do it with ocean plastic. And so we started with ocean plastic by creating our global map of the plastic beaches around the world that are fouled by plastic, seriously affected by plastic, and it's kind of like the COVID map that Johns Hopkins University did. You see the red dots on the map, you start to understand where the areas of high impact are, and that allows you to think about where you could have the most impact if you are working in those areas. So, and as we worked on that, we realized that even though it's an international problem, it's really a local problem. It's Ocean plastic is a local problem everywhere, and it's the accumulation of those local impacts that create the problem. And while some people think that the plastic is out in the middle of the gyre in this giant trash heap, that's really not true. That's a myth. 75% of it is on a beach somewhere. So if it's on a beach, you can find it, and it becomes a geography problem. How did it get there? What are the pathways upstream, up current from which you can find where the plastic got to that beach, and then start to identify the literally the places where the pollution leaked into the environment and how could it be stopped so that someday we're not just cleaning up beaches. We're stopping it from getting into the environment, period. That's the goal, moving from cleanup to prevention. And so we've developed a dashboard and toolkit and predictive model that will allow us and people in regions around the world to adopt this model and find those places where it's leaked and stop it from getting into the ocean. We've been very fortunate. I see, Acacia, I looked you up while you were talking that you're have a COVID surveillance project in Ecuador. We are working in Ecuador with four federal agencies, NGOs, and universities to implement a full-scale pilot of our model and see if we can figure out exactly where Ecuador's beaches are fouled by what, and the Galapagos Islands as well. And so it's been, I have to say, the Ecuadorians are a great group of people to work with. They're selfless and excited to be part of a project that we believe is world leading. So that's about Open Oceans Global, Tammy.
Well, can you talk a bit about the tool sets? I suppose that the thing is so intriguing is how do you identify it? I mean, are you doing this by satellite? Are you going to these places? How are you mapping ocean currents? Because part of it we wonder like there's islands, especially islands we're working right now with projects in Indonesia. Their islands just have so much stuff. Yeah, it comes from tourists, but some of it is just coming in from through the currents from other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, that we had developed a one of the tools. Well, I should back up a little bit. We see there's a number of tools, and if you understand plastic and how plastic moves, you also understand the world's uh, the biological and natural processes that move it. So it's the meteorology, hydrology, and oceanography are the three areas that move plastic, and it starts out in the middle of the ocean where storms come and start to create waves and currents. Those storms move on to land and they create watersheds that wash the plastic down into the ocean. When it gets to the ocean, it hits those ocean currents that the storms themselves have predicted. So understanding that full cycle is how you understand that you understand plastic. You also understand the full cycle of how other issues are involved and what the data could be that could help you solve them. And so that's we're excited about that larger part of it. One of the tools is a plastic tracing tool, our offshore tracing tool, and it goes back. You put a dot on the ocean off the beach where you found plastic, or out in the middle of the ocean where you found plastic, and it will backtrack to the potential place where it came from. The we have it required a NOAA layer. Noah stopped producing that layer, and so last week I met with the NOAA modeling people, and they were so excited about it that I think they're going to redevelop that tool for us. So it not only includes ocean current data, but ocean goes wind and wave energy because that modifies where that plastic might move, and we're hoping it will be a very important tool to intercept help us identify where the plastic moves, where it came from, and in addition, we're looking at modeling to where Global Fishing Watch tracks all of the fishing happening all over the world. We know that part of the plastic that reaches the beaches of the Galapagos and islands and shorelines everywhere comes because marine mammals interact with interact with the fishing fleets. They get tangled in the gear. The fishermen have no choice but to cut the gear free, and then ultimately you have gear on the beach, sometimes with the whales, sometimes with not. But so we think we're going to be able to start to predict that, say, hey, whales are coming, and when whales have come through a fishing fleet, to alert the folks in the Galapagos and other places that there may be debris happening because of that. We would love to have that because we have put together a database of the beaches that we believe are fouled by plastic based on studies that have been made available to us. But we're always looking for more. And I think one of the things I didn't include is that the basic philosophy behind open oceans is that by sharing information, you create community. And if you have a way to visualize it together, and that's really the goal of it, even though we pride ourselves on having the best information available and working to bring data together. It's the bringing data together that also brings people together, and they can solve problems together if they have that opportunity. So part of the toolkit, if you will, is we work with Esri, which is the major software mapping company in the world, and we work with them, and they have a hub portal that allows all the information and the people to come together in a way that it creates a place for an initiative to be mobilized.
Mm. So
Thank you.
Howard, when you I'm trying to, I go the devil's in the details kind of thing. You have these tools, and I have no idea what they look like. Maybe that could be something that you could share. First of all, NOAA, for those who are from the United States, that is the National Oceanic, what is an
And
Atmospheric.
atmospheric administration.
atmosphere? Okay.
Yeah.
Um, what exactly are you measuring so that one of the things you and I talked about is what a perfect connection it is for Rotary to connect with you about where to target and be, because I'm really on this vent of we want to make major changes in our world to decrease our global increasing temperatures by 2050. How can you help us target where we should implement programs, and how do you measure success, I guess?
Well, Rotary is everywhere, and if you believe my assumption that the international plastic crisis is really an accumulation of local plastic crises, Rotary could play a very key role and help us identify the places where plastic leaks into the environment. We know, for instance, in Ecuador, one of the major problems we haven't got the data in place yet, but we know it to be true from reliable sources is that there are a number of villages upstream and towns upstream that don't have any land management capability. So they literally dump their collected waste into the river, and it comes floating down the river and ends up in the ocean. And typically, reports that you see, even very good reports, are at a very high level philosophical. If you think about it this way, they say, "Gosh, in country X." Waste management is poor. It's going to take about $4 billion to fix it. Well, those kind of reports are helpful, but they don't tell you exactly where. And so what you have to do is find out where that's happening. That's a geography problem, and then try to identify resources to help them fix that so it doesn't continue. And so what Rotary could do with, our part of our toolkit is it has a geographical based survey tool that you can put a dot on that place where the village dumps the trash into the river and say, this is where it happens. This is the village that's the one of the problems. Once we have that, we can go to the decision makers and not talk about it in a generic term. We can talk about it in a granular term. Say there's 37 villages that really need this help. How can we all work together to help them have the kind of waste management they need and keep the waste out of the ocean? And it is map based, so our map allows you to use satellite imagery and view the area that's potentially a problem, and then mark that map with a dot and some data about what's there, so we know what the impact is and how we can address it.
Okay, I'm going to pause on my questions here because I want to include all the people asking questions. Gertjan, welcome from Amsterdam. This is my co-chair of End Plastic Soup.
I
Gertjan, you have a question.
Yes,
Of the plastic in your household, and someone told me the other day about we ship our plastic away, whether we ship it within the U.S. or we ship it away to other countries. Wouldn't it be interesting to see if we just kept all of our plastic, started collecting it in a special can just all by itself to see? Is that you that told me that, Tammy? So,
Yes, when we had
yeah,
our plastic meeting last week, I was
yeah, yeah.
very, that's just a pet peeve of mine that we either we put it in our landfills, and if our landfills get filled, it is shipped
Mhm,
to another community. So we have a social justice issue going on. And we're also
mhm.
paying for that transportation. And then we're also shipping our plastic to other countries. And if you made people one or two things, if you took out the single source streaming for recyclables that we do, and you had people keep out their plastic and know then that what they have collected and they want to throw it away, 79% of that is going to landfill or going someplace else. It would be very eye-opening. But I'd say that thank you for bringing that up, Carl, because I really think we need to address the awareness that we can't be filling our landfills with this massive amounts of plastic. And if we had policy, and Susan might talk on this later, but if we had policy that truly restricted the exporting of plastic, it would make a humongous difference. But if you want, I've said this before, if you want 11 hours of depression, listen to the book Waste Wars. And it is a mafiosa kind of program that's going on all around the world to ship our plastic to other places. And it's horrific, and they're left to clean it up. And you
Uh,
mentioned waste management. What is waste management anyway for plastic? In a country, we don't even have it here in the United States to deal with this stuff. So waste management is this garbage can of a term that says we're just collecting it together and moving it to maybe a more safe spot where we're bearing it and dealing with that way. We've got to continue to work on that end of recycling life cycle stuff.
Yeah, I mean the we use data on the rivers from Ocean Cleanup, which is done. They've analyzed like 33,000 rivers in the world. So if you go to their website, I think it's oceancleanup.org, you'll find a map of their rivers. And we use the data from those rivers. We've got the and we have the data that shows in Ecuador on our map. And you won't see that publicly yet, but it's how we're analyzing what rivers need to be looked at first, based on the estimated emissions of plastic from those rivers, based on ocean cleanup data in the Majir report of 2021. Our map at openoceans.org, you can see the plastic trash map, which shows the beaches around the world that we've identified that are seriously affected by plastic. And it has an online tool that you can use. You use it on your phone. If you have a beach that you think needs to be reported to our map, you can use our online tool and report it on the map, and it'll automatically populate the map, and we see it. We'll verify that it's coming from a good source, a verifiable source, and that's beaches, not rivers. And because our focus it starts on the rivers.
Your focus starts on the rivers,
No,
and that's
excuse me, I'm not running on all cylinders today. I've had stomach flu for 2 days, so apology if I'm misdipping. Um,
no worries.
we focus on beaches because beaches is where most of it collects, and people care about beaches and people understand what macro ocean plastic is, and that's why we're focusing on that.
So if you're using the data from ocean cleanup, are you just reporting it in a different way? In other words, how do you're using those measurements, and if Rotary comes in and we're going to we see that we want to clean up, I guess what I'm missing here is what can, how does Rotary identify these critical rivers, I guess, and then we can maybe reach out to Rotary clubs there, and then where do you come into play here?
Well, I think it starts with the beaches, and our toolkit starts with the beaches. And if Rotary wanted to get involved, we would be happy to have a training with them in Ecuador to show them, with the Rotary clubs in Ecuador, to show them how the toolkit works, and to show them how you. So you start on a beach, and there's only three ways plastic can get on a beach. It gets local litter from people just using the beach, or litter that comes, adjacent to it from the walkway adjacent to it where people are walking. It can come from a water source like a river or a canal or a storm drain, or it comes from offshore. And if you can eliminate one or two of those, you can really focus on where how it got to that beach. And if you think if in cleaning up the beach you find out that it's mostly all just local litter, it's clean trash, it's not doesn't have anything that indicates it's from a river or from offshore, then you really, your education is what you need to do in that area. However, if you think it came up from a river, you use our ocean current information to say, did it come from the river to the north or did it come from the river to the south? Then you go up that river and see what the potential sources are up that river. And that's where Rotary could come into a significant play, is to say, okay, what do Rotary clubs know about what's going on in that river, and how can they help us use our map, use our tools to find where those places of litter accumulation are. It could be from the map, it can just be from local knowledge. People know, and but they don't have a way to report it. And so this is reporting places where there's significant plastic accumulation that when it rains is going to wash into the river system or into the canals and end up on the beach.
Well, I think that something that gets far too little um, awareness is the contribution of upstream canals and storm drains, and how we need to get awareness going on this, drains to the bay. Oh, no, don't dump in these storm drains, et cetera, et cetera. I want to, before I know you have to take off, actually, God, the time is passing so quickly. When you talked a little bit about the plastic treaty, and you have a good friend now who's on the plastic treaty, and we came up with two ideas about like and Susan, where does Susan still on the call? Oh, there you are, the top left corner. Sorry, you switched your position on my screen. Um, uh, what are the things that you mentioned, things that we can do as alternatives, because we're not going to get the plastic treaty as we had hoped. Do you remember what those were? If not, I'll pull up my notes, and I unfortunately forgot to get my glasses. But what were your thoughts on alternatives to how we can approach and make a difference?
Wait, are you talking to me?
Oh, I was talking to Carl, and then I was going to loop you in, Susan. Sorry, I talked too long.
Well, I think I could talk about the plastic treaty overall. We are an accredited observer of the International Ocean Plastic Pollution Treaty process, and so we were in Geneva at the last session, and it's deadlocked, and it's deadlocked For really one primary reason is deadlocked, and that's the group of countries called the High Ambition Coalition wants there to be numerical cuts in production of plastic, which in a philosophical sense makes perfect sense. I mean, I think we'd all agree that there's too much plastic and used too many places. But from a policy and diplomacy perspective, the United Nations requires a consensus-based process. That means that every country has to agree. And the very countries that you want to agree that produce the most plastic, and they're called the like-minded countries in UN parlance. Those like-minded countries include places like Iran, Russia, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and several others that are high plastic producers. They're the ones that are going to have to cut plastic production. So it's literally not possible for the negotiators for those countries to go back to their policy leaders, their political leaders, and say, yes, we agreed to cut plastic production by 20% or some number. They just literally can't go back and do that. And the Luis Valles, who was the Ecuador's ambassador to the UK, who was also the chair of the negotiations, and put some language together that I thought was pretty brilliant. He didn't use the word cuts production because those countries that produce the most plastic wouldn't agree to it. But he did use different language that I thought was effective. He said we should agree not to not produce, manufacture, import, or export plastic that has a chance of being a high likelihood of becoming pollution. That was a diplomatic way for the negotiators for those countries to go back and say, look, we agree that we don't want plastic pollution to happen. We don't know what this is going to mean in terms of implementation, but we can agree to this. And it was immediately blocked by the High Ambition Coalition, and they put the words stop, cut production back into the language, and that stalled the treaty again. And that's where it stands at this point right now. And my sense is if we want a treaty that has some effectiveness, it has to include everybody, and it has to include those countries that produce the most plastic, because if they're not included, they're not having any incentive to reduce the plastic that they're producing. But if they have a way to start reducing it because has a likelihood of being pollution, and they come up with alternatives and different ways to address it, then we may gain some ground. And meanwhile, again, we've got to do work on the local level.
Which is basically EPR and producer responsibility.
That's a key part of it. It's certainly a key. It's not all of it, but it's a key part of it. And there are examples around the world. I don't think we have anybody on the call from Norway, but Norway achieves a 95% reduction in their or a 90 they recycle 95% of their pet plastic. That's the bottles that we get our sodas and water in. And they do it with a very innovative process. First, they have a bottle bill process. The consumer pays, as they do in many places, including here in California, pays a price for every bottle that they have, that they buy. And then there's a tax, a progressive tax that gets less and less on the manufacturers of those products as they approach 95% of recyclability. When they get to 95%, there's no tax at all. So they have an incentive to make sure that their products are recycled, and then they in turn to help them do that formed a nonprofit that guides them on design of their products and education and the other things that need to happen to make sure that 95% goal is achieved. That's the best example we've seen around the world of how that can work. And you compare that to California, where here we think we're kind of the best in everything environmental. We only achieve 57% plastic recycling, and then in many of the states in the U.S. only recycle less than 5% of their PET bottles. So there's great gains that can be made in that regard. EPR doesn't solve everything, but it's a good step in the right direction. It's a step in the right direction, and and very helpful. But that's the status in very short terms of the plastic treaties. I see it. The corporate world wants to really focus solely on recycling. They think we can get to 100% recycling, which is even if it could happen, is not likely to happen anytime in the near future. And there are other issues that I think agreement can be gained on in terms of understanding the toxicity of plastic products and reducing and eliminating toxicity in plastic products is another key element. And of course, there's financing, which we didn't talk about, Tammy, but we can see in the climate treaty that financing has been an issue, and it will be an issue in financing those countries to make the changes that are needed in addressing plastic pollution as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and the other thing that we mentioned was that's always been mentioned earlier today, which is to focus a lot on not transporting our waste to others, and that's a policy that could make a big difference as well. So right now, I'd love to loop in Susan, who came to talk here to talk a little bit about policy. She is the Western United States uh, program director or
So,
whatever for Sierra Club.
so I'm the Loma Prieta chapter plastic pollution prevention committee chair. And so just real quickly, because I can see there's not much time left. Is there anybody here from Canada? Okay, I would like to give a huge shout out to Canada. So they did what we really want countries to do. They had their scientists study plastic as a substance, and the scientists came back and said plastic is toxic. Not a plastic is toxic, or this plastic is toxic, or microplastics are toxic, or nanoplastics are toxic, but plastic is toxic. And in 2021, Canada put plastic on their substance one list, and that enabled anywhere, including the entire country of Canada, to make laws. And so Ottawa, as an example, the city of Ottawa immediately put into place a law banning single-use plastic. Industry challenged them. In 2023, a single judge said that it went against the Canadian Constitution. However, January of 2026, so we're talking last month, a full panel of federal Canadian judges said that judge was wrong and that it does not go against the Constitution, and immediately put the law back into effect, which put the laws in Ottawa back into effect, along with whatever other laws were enacted across Canada. Okay, now I'm going to skip to the state of California because I live here and that's what I know. The Department of Toxic Substance Control in California is currently studying, unfortunately, not all of plastic, but microplastics. And they're considering putting that into their chemicals of concern list. So we're sort of on the way, trailing behind the country of Canada. Again, I applaud Canada. And I'm hoping that we'll continue to take steps. And without taking up too much more time, I would like to put into the chat a United States effort to start with step one, which is to study the problem like Canada did in 2020. It's the Microplastic Safety Act, and so there's a group, Ocean Plastics Listserv, that I belong to, and they're asking organizations to sign on to this. And I have great faith that the Sierra Club will be doing this. However, I don't know, about how your process works, but I ask that you take a look at this and consider it.
Thank you. So one of the things that may help you, Acacia, is the health effects of plastics, because that reaches to mothers and the population as far as health concerns, and that can be a way of introducing the concerns about plastics. And in the medical field, there have been increasing grand rounds and presentations by physicians on the medical effects of microplastics, nanoplastics, and especially the endocrine disrupting chemicals that are associated with plastics. And that is a good lead-in to um, bring public concern, which, as an individual, standing up to industry is very difficult. But when you get public opinion, especially women concerned about the health of their children, that can be a powerful statement. So recently, Dr. Jean Van Dis, who's an obstetrician, gave a presentation on pregnancy and microplastics to the clinicians for climate action in New Jersey. And Dr. Mary Kosuth, who is at the University of Minnesota, the Institute on the Environment, talked about reducing plastic waste in healthcare. And healthcare has been one of those carve-out things that has been kind of spared scrutiny as far as plastic waste, but increasingly there's concern about the effects of microplastics in the human body and the endocrine disrupting chemicals on child development, neurodevelopment, obesity, diabetes, and cancers, which we're seeing increased incidence of. And so Mary Kasuth spoke to the Physician and Scientists Network addressing plastics and health. And PSNAP is a great group that has data that helps you formulate an argument to present to your constituents about health concerns. And it's a great resource. Interestingly, there's going to be a Netflix documentary, The Plastic Detox, featuring Shauna Swan, who's done a lot of the work on endocrine disrupting chemicals. That'll be in mid-March. And so something to keep your eyes out for. And there are now medical groups looking at reducing plastic waste, including OB/GYNs for Sustainable Future as part of Healthcare Without Harm. And there's also an ophthalmology group, eyesustain.org. That's EYESUSTAIN.org on reducing plastic surgical waste. One paper that I came across recently, it's from May of 2024, showing microplastics in arterial clots and venous clots with greater severity associated with the presence of microplastics in these things, which fits with the prothrombotic aspect of microplastics. And then in terms of legislation, one of the things I just wanted to briefly mention is that in the U.S., our Environmental Protection Agency is anything but, with the current head having rescinded what's called the endangerment finding, which had allowed the federal government to regulate emissions from vehicles and industry. And as we know, plastics are a big factor in terms of climate change, CO2 production, and other greenhouse gases. So the Union of Concerned Scientists, along with Sierra Club and others, have sued to prevent this, but the federal government has already limited the state's ability to regulate emissions to be stricter than federal standards. We'll see what happens, but some of the Republican-led states have already entered legislation to prohibit their states from restricting emission standards. So a lot is happening here. It's not too happy in this area. I did want to mention also that there is a Gloves Off campaign in the United Kingdom and also occurring in the US, where we're trying to reduce the unnecessary use of non-sterile gloves in healthcare because we use a lot of them unnecessarily and they go single use right into the trash and obviously not a good thing. So that's a whirlwind tour of some updates from healthcare and federal uh, uh, legislation.